Three F-22 Raptors locked onto a lone civilian jet at 30,000 feet. "Hey, Grandma, you lost on your way to the museum," one pilot sneered. Another chuckled. "Pretty bold flying that antique. Hope it's not held together with duct tape." They laughed, mocked, called her a grandma playing Top Gun. But inside the cockpit of that aging L-39, the woman didn't flinch. She didn't explain. She didn't apologize. She simply pressed the radio button and said two words with the calm of someone who'd seen real fire. "This is Valkyrie." And in that moment, the entire sky fell silent. Long before the call sign, Valkyrie became whispered legend. Elise Monroe was just another determined cadet with something to prove. She didn't come from a military family. No famous last name, no connections, just grit, sharp instincts, and an unwavering refusal to be underestimated. In flight school, instructors called her precise. Her peers called her lucky, but she wasn't either. She was prepared. Always, by her early 30s, Elise had already flown more combat hours than most saw in a lifetime. She had earned a quiet reputation, not as someone loud or boastful, but as the one you wanted in the air when things went sideways. When a mission was called impossible, Valkyrie volunteered. Then came Operation Midnight Halo, a Black Ops air engagement so deeply classified it officially never existed. Elise had been part of a recon squadron tasked with escorting a high-value extraction unit across hostile airspace. What began as routine turned into catastrophe when the unit was ambushed by a swarm of enemy fighters, 12 against 4. Within the first few minutes, 2 friendly aircraft were down. The sky became chaos. And then, Elise vanished. At least that's what the enemy thought. Over the next 40 minutes, she reappeared and disappeared like a ghost in the clouds, jamming radar, feigning decoys, creating phantom squadrons with signal tricks no one had ever seen before. She flew her aging bird like it was an extension of her nervous system. By the time reinforcements arrived, not a single enemy plane remained. Every pilot in her squad had made it home. All thanks to one woman who had turned the sky into a battlefield of shadows. The mission was never declassified. The medals were never awarded. But the story spread, not through headlines or press conferences, but in hushed retellings inside briefing rooms, whispered over beers and hangars. "The Valkyrie saved them," they'd say. "She beat 12 in 1. Years later, after her discharge, Elise never sought the spotlight. She disappeared from the public eye and bought an old L-39 Albatross, a relic by modern standards, and began flying again. Not for war, not for show, but for herself. Each takeoff was therapy. Each flight was a conversation with the sky. She didn't need applause. The roar of the jet, the rush of clouds, the pull of gravity, that was enough. Up there, no one asked about politics or orders or the medals she never received. The sky didn't care about rank or legacy, and that's why she returned to it again and again. People in town only knew her as the quiet woman with tired eyes and a plane too old to matter. They didn't know what she had done or who she really was. And Elise preferred it that way. Because some battles leave you with more than scars. They leave you with stories too heavy to tell. And silence is sometimes the only medal that fits. 30,000 feet above the earth, the clouds were soft and endless. A ceiling of silence stretching from horizon to horizon. Captain Elise Monroe, call sign Valkyrie, sat in her aging L-39 Albatross, hands steady on the control stick. The aircraft wasn't much to look at. Faded paint, analog gauges. No stealth coating, no radar cloaking, no advanced weapon systems. Just an old jet, a pair of wings, and a woman who had outflown ghosts. She was following a filed civilian flight plan, heading cross-country toward an airstrip in Utah, where she sometimes trained younger private aviators. It was supposed to be just another quiet flight, but the quiet broke, not with turbulence, but with an unmistakable tone. Ping. The radar warning receiver lit up. Not one, not two, but 3 distinct radar locks. Military grade. Fast. Aggressive. Within seconds, she saw them. 3 F-22 Raptors, slicing through the clouds like metallic predators. The apex of air dominance moving in perfect triangle formation. All sleek lines and silent menace. If aircraft had expressions, These wore smirks. One of the Raptors slid into her left flank, close enough for Elise to see the faint gold of the pilot's visor through the canopy. The other two took positions slightly above and behind. Classic containment posture. Then came the voice, sharp and youthful, over the emergency frequency. Unidentified civilian aircraft. This is Viper Lead of the United States Air Force. You are in violation of restricted airspace. Descend immediately to 22,000 feet and divert heading to 145. Acknowledge. Elise didn't flinch. She glanced at her instruments. Her flight path had drifted, barely, into a newly restricted training corridor. It wasn't on the charts when she filed this morning. Bureaucratic oversight, probably. An easy fix. She could have explained, could have complied. But the tone in that young man's voice, it wasn't just protocol, it was arrogance, swagger, the kind that came from flying a machine worth hundreds of millions and thinking that made you untouchable. A second voice broke through, more amused this time. Is that an L-39? What is this, a flying museum exhibit? Another pilot chuckled. Hey, Grandma, you lost on your way to the retirement flyover? Their laughter crackled through the airwaves, juvenile and overconfident. Elise's thumb hovered over the transmission button, but she stayed silent. Mock her aircraft? Fine. Mock her age? Typical. Threaten her like a rookie? That was the real mistake. She had heard it all before. Early in her career, they laughed because she was a woman. Later, because she was too calm, too quiet, too old school. Until those same voices called for backup, and she'd already handled it. The lead Raptor pilot cut in again, voice firm now. Civilian aircraft, this is your final warning. You are locked and tracked. Comply or we will force a landing. Elise's eyes narrowed as her HUD displayed the targeting bracket from the F-22. The irony was thick. 3 pilots, decades younger, flying jets she once helped test in simulation theory, now locking onto her like she was just another lost weekend warrior. She took a breath. This wasn't fear. It was clarity. Her heartbeat slowed, her mind sharpened. She reached out, slowly, deliberately, and pressed the comm switch. Her voice when it came was steady, cold, not raised, not apologetic, just absolute. Viper flight. This is Captain Elise Monroe. Call sign Valkyrie. Silence. The airwaves, just moments ago filled with chuckles and swagger, went dead. In the lead Raptor cockpit, Lieutenant Jake Viper Morrison stiffened. He didn't speak. He couldn't. That name, that call sign, didn't belong to a civilian joyrider. It belonged to a ghost, a legend whispered through training schools. The pilot who had turned the tables on 12 enemies, the one whose name wasn't in the records, but whose tactics were still taught. A low murmur cut through the private comms. Did she say, Valkyrie? Another voice whispered back, that's not possible. Valkyrie's a myth. But the silence in their cockpits said otherwise. And out there, slicing across the sky in her antique trainer jet, Elise didn't grin. She didn't gloat. She just watched them through her canopy. 3 of the world's most advanced jets, frozen in place because of a name. She leaned back slightly in her seat and muttered, mostly to herself, still works. The radio went silent. Not a single word, not a breath. The sky, just moments ago filled with arrogance and static-laced laughter, had collapsed into pure, deafening quiet. Inside the lead F-22, Lieutenant Jake Viper Morrison's fingers froze above his throttle. His confident smirk evaporated as if yanked from his face by gravity itself. He stared at the HUD, and then at the silver silhouette of the L-39 cruising calmly beside him. He blinked. Captain Elise Monroe. Valkyrie? He didn't say it over the comms. He whispered it under his breath. Beside him, his wingman, Viper 2, muttered through the internal channel. No way. That can't be the Valkyrie. I thought she was a legend, Morrison finished, his voice barely audible. But legends didn't speak over the emergency frequency. They didn't fly L-39s through restricted airspace at 30,000 feet with the composure of a Sunday drive. And yet, here she was. The third pilot, Viper 3, spoke up now, but his voice was different. Hushed, cautious, almost reverent. That call sign, my squadron commander told us about her during combat school. She flew solo through a kill box during Operation Midnight Halo. 12 hostile fighters. She brought her team home. Every single one. Morrison's hands were sweating now, even through his gloves. The training exercises, the lectures, the quiet stories exchanged in ready rooms. Suddenly they weren't fiction anymore. They were happening. Control had said nothing yet, but he knew the command center was listening. Everyone was. Entire towers had gone still, watching, waiting. And then the crackle came. A new voice, stern, older, commanding. All Viper units, disengage immediately. Repeat, disengage. Maintain distance. No further action. Escort only. Escort only. Just minutes ago, they were about to lock weapons on what they thought was a civilian pilot with a death wish. Now, they were her honor guard. No one questioned the order. Not a single complaint. No resistance. The Raptors gently shifted formation. Their HUD brackets vanished as they deactivated targeting systems. Their predatory stance became protection. 3 lethal machines surrounding an old L-39 like bodyguards walking with a queen. Inside her cockpit, Elise didn't say a word. She simply kept her hands on the controls, her eyes fixed ahead, calm, focused. She'd seen this before. The shift, the sudden collapse of bravado when truth steps into the room. She didn't need their awe. She certainly didn't need their apology. But the silence, she appreciated that. It was the only salute that ever felt honest. Back inside Morrison's jet, the young lieutenant took a shaky breath. He didn't even realize he had been holding it. 1,000 thoughts fought for space in his head. The Valkyrie, the one they said jammed enemy sensors with just her maneuvers. The one who ghosted fighters off radar like shadows swallowed by the sun. The one whose tactics were still classified, but whose call sign was spoken like a warning. He felt small now. Not because he flew a lesser plane. He didn't. The F-22 was the most advanced jet ever built, but because he had mistaken technology for superiority. What separated Valkyrie from every pilot he'd ever known wasn't her gear. It was her presence. The kind of presence you don't learn in a simulator. The comms crackled again, this time a private pilot-to-pilot channel. Morrison swallowed and keyed in. "Ma'am, Captain Monroe, this is Lieutenant Morrison. I owe you an apology for earlier." A pause, then her voice returned. Still even, still centered. "Apology accepted, Lieutenant. We've all been young and loud at altitude." And with that, it was done. No lecture, no bitterness, just grace. Above the clouds, the formation held. 3 F-22 Raptors, aircraft that could erase most enemies before they knew they were being targeted, now held position behind a trainer jet built in the Cold War. And yet none of them dared fly ahead of her. Because that old bird carried something no modern machine could match. A name. And names like Valkyrie didn't fly with permission. They flew with memory, with legacy, with the kind of gravity that bends even the sky. The sky stretched quiet and boundless, a canvas of stillness at 30,000 feet. Lieutenant Nathan Blaze Carter sat in his cockpit, struggling to process what had just unfolded. He'd mocked her, laughed even, thought she was just another outdated civilian trying to relive her glory days. But now he flew in formation behind her, behind Valkyrie. The name his instructors only whispered. The L-39 looked small from where he sat, slower, simpler, but suddenly it didn't feel like a relic. It felt untouchable. Unable to hold it in, Carter reached for the private comm frequency, the one they used during training flights. One-on-one. No ranks, no record. He keyed in slowly. "Ma'am, Captain Monroe, this is Lieutenant Carter. I just wanted to say what I said earlier. I was out of line, and I'm sorry." A beat of silence. Then 2. He half expected her to ignore it. Maybe she would just let the guilt eat at him. It's what he'd deserve. But her voice came back. Calm, composed, not the least bit shaken. "Apology accepted, Lieutenant. We've all said things we regret when we think no one's listening, especially in the sky." No scolding, no sarcasm, just grace. Still, it wasn't enough. not for Carter. He needed to understand who he was flying behind. Ma'am, if you don't mind me asking, he hesitated, then took the leap. Operation Midnight Halo. Is it true? What they say you did? Another pause, longer this time. When Elise responded, her voice had shifted, less formal, more measured, like she was walking through a room full of fragile memories. What do they say I did, Lieutenant? They say you were outnumbered 12-1, that you created fake radar signatures, confused the enemy into thinking they were being ambushed, and that you saved every pilot in your squadron, flying an aircraft that should have been retired 10 years before. Her laugh was soft, almost invisible. They say a lot of things. But yes, she added after a beat, the numbers are right. The outcome is real. And the aircraft? It wasn't about what it could do. It was about what I made it do. Carter leaned in slightly. The systems in his F-22 hummed as always. Quiet, powerful, reliable. But none of them had ever taught him what she was saying now. Ma'am, how do you win a fight like that? Against those odds? You don't fight their fight, she said simply. You make them fight yours. You cloud their judgment, stretch their attention, make one jet look like a dozen, make every decision they make feel like the wrong one. And when they hesitate, even for a second, you finish it. He swallowed hard. It wasn't just tactics. It was psychology. It was warfare as art, and she had painted it in the sky alone. But here's what matters, Carter, she continued. Technology doesn't win the fight. Training helps, sure. But in the end, it's about purpose. That day, I didn't fly for medals or for pride. I flew because 68 people, pilots, crew, officers, needed to go home. I flew because failure wasn't an option I was willing to accept. And that kind of clarity, her voice lowered, that's what turns a pilot into a weapon. Nathan didn't speak. There was nothing left to say, not yet. In his entire career, he had never been trained in that kind of flying, the kind where what mattered more than wingspan, where clarity cut sharper than any missile. And yet somehow he now flew with someone who lived it, not in theory, but in blood and vapor trails. He keyed in once more, his voice softer. Ma'am, would you teach us some of it? If not the tactics, at least the mindset? A long pause, and then, for the first time, she smiled. We'll see, Lieutenant, but next time, try not to open with Grandma. Laughter, genuine warm, filled his cockpit. And just like that, the sky felt different. Not because the formation had changed, but because he had. 2 days later, the hangar at Grey Rock Air Base had been converted into a makeshift lecture hall. Rows of metal chairs faced a projection screen, but the room buzzed with something electricity couldn't generate. Anticipation. Word had spread. The Valkyrie was speaking, not in some classified Pentagon briefing, not behind closed doors with medals and titles, but here, now, in front of them, the next generation of fighter pilots. Most of them were young, cocky, talented. They had flown sims that mimicked combat zones. They had trained with VR goggles and tactical AI overlays. But none of that compared to standing in the same room as her. Captain Elise Monroe, Valkyrie. She stepped to the front. No ceremony, no pomp, just presence. She wore a worn olive-green flight suit with no insignia, her hair tied back loosely. The only thing that sparkled was the reflection of sunlight off the scarred wings of an L-39 parked just outside the hangar bay. She looked at them all, silent, focused. Then she spoke. Who here can tell me the difference between flying and combat flying? A few hands rose tentatively. A young lieutenant near the front answered, Flying is executing procedures. Combat flying is executing them under pressure, under fire. Elise nodded. Partially right, she said. But let me ask again. When things go wrong, when missiles lock, when comms fail and you're alone in the clouds, what's the one thing that separates who lives from who doesn't? Silence. Not one simulator had taught that answer. She let the pause linger. Then, judgment. Flying teaches you control. Combat teaches you consequences. The room stilled. In flight school, you memorize checklists. Maneuvers, emergency procedures. Good, necessary. But combat isn't about memory, it's about instinct sharpened by purpose. She stepped forward slowly, her boots echoing softly on the floor. When you're up there, no one's coming to save you. You don't have time to wonder if you're good enough. You have seconds, maybe less, and to make a choice. And that choice isn't in the manual, it's in you. A slide clicked on the screen. It wasn't a chart, it was a grainy photo. Elise's L-39 flying alone in the clouds, a faint trail behind it. This was me, alone, outnumbered, outgunned. Everyone on my squad thought we were dead, including me. So I made a decision. I didn't try to beat them at their fight. I made them play mine. I made them chase ghosts. I became 12 targets instead of one. I hacked their expectation, not their radar. Gas rippled through the room. The Phantom Squadron technique was a rumor, an unteachable myth. And now, it had a face. "You want to know the secret?" she said. Dozens leaned in. "It's not about flying harder. It's about seeing the fight before it begins, reading the other pilot before they move, understanding that every decision in the air begins on the ground, in how you think, in why you fly." She paused and scanned the room. The sky doesn't care how new your jet is, or how many medals you've earned. It only asks one thing. Can you choose right when everything goes wrong? And with that, she stepped away from the podium. No applause, no rank pulled. Just a message passed, like a flame, not a trophy. Behind her, a new generation sat stunned, and somewhere among them, a young pilot whispered, "She didn't just teach us how to fight, she taught us why." 6 months later, the morning sun bathed the grounds of the Air Force Academy in warm gold. Rows of graduating cadets sat at attention in their crisp dress blues, the insignias on their shoulders gleaming in the light. Family members filled the stands. Flags danced in the breeze. It was a day of ceremony, of pride, of pageantry. But every head turned when she stepped forward. Captain Elise Monroe, Valkyrie, no rank on her chest, no ribbons on her shoulders, just the presence of someone who didn't need to be introduced. She walked toward the podium slowly, her boots echoing softly on the stone. There was no dramatic entrance, no fanfare, just respect, thick and unspoken, hanging in the air. Behind her, an enormous image had been projected on a screen, her old L-39 Albatross, flying through a sky half lit with the colors of dusk, a symbol of simplicity, of resolve. She adjusted the mic, looked out at the young faces staring back, some filled with awe, others with curiosity, and many with the quiet hunger to become something more. She began. "You've spent years studying lift, drag, thrust, and control. You've mastered maneuvers, memorized regulations, completed simulations, and survived real-time tests. And today, you graduate, pilots of the United States Air Force." She paused. "But before you take to the sky in uniform, there's one thing you must understand, something no manual, no briefing, no simulator can teach you. Your call sign is not just a nickname. It's a vow." Her eyes moved across the rows. The silence deepened. "A vow that when the mission falters, when everything goes sideways, when there's no backup and nowhere to land, you don't quit. You don't hesitate. You don't look for someone else to fix it. You fly through." She took a breath. "When I was your age, I thought a call sign was a joke, something cool, something to show off. But one day, mine became the only thing I had left when everything else was falling apart. And I realized a true call sign isn't given. It's earned. Not in the good days, but in the moments no one sees. When fear and instinct fight for control, and the only thing keeping you from folding is the memory of why you started." A soft wind blew through the courtyard. Elise stepped forward again, her voice lower now, but stronger. "When you take flight after today, you're not just representing the Air Force. You're carrying the weight of those who flew before you, those who never made it back, and those who still fly in silence. And that weight, if you carry it with purpose, will lift you higher than any afterburner ever could." She looked toward the sky, squinting slightly against the light. "Someday you'll be tested. Not just in battle, but in doubt, in silence. When orders feel wrong or logic fails or the math says you should turn back. And in that moment, you'll remember who you are, and more importantly, why you are. She turned back to them, the sun catching her profile as she gave a final nod. Earn your name, cadets. Fly with it like it's the only thing that can't be shot down. Because one day, it just might be. She stepped down, and for a long moment, no one spoke. Then, not applause, not cheering, but every cadet in the front row stood and saluted, because sometimes the most powerful speech isn't about glory, it's about reminding others that some names don't rise from praise, they rise from purpose. The sky was endless, wide, clean, quiet. Above 35,000 feet, the noise of the world disappeared. No cities, no politics, no static, just air, wind, sun, and metal. Captain Elise Monroe, Valkyrie, flew alone. Her L-39 Albatross, with its faded paint and tired frame, cut a slender silhouette through the atmosphere. Around her, like silent sentinels, flew three F-35s. Sleek, modern, lethal. They shimmered in the sun like blades, every inch of them engineered for dominance. And yet, none of them flew ahead of her. They stayed in a respectful V formation behind the old bird. It wasn't protocol. It wasn't assigned. It was instinct. Because some pilots don't need speed to lead. They only need gravity, the kind you earn, not the kind that pulls you down. Inside her cockpit, Elise didn't speak into the radio. This moment wasn't for anyone else. No broadcast, no call sign, just her and the sky. She looked out over the clouds, her eyes catching the shimmer of the contrails from the jets behind her. They danced gently in the afternoon sun like the brushstrokes of time. She reached out a gloved hand, adjusted the throttle slightly and smiled. Not because she felt victorious, but because she felt clear. A whisper left her lips, not for anyone to hear, just for the sky itself. Technology changes, but the right decisions under pressure, that's what the sky remembers. She knew her days in the cockpit were numbered. The next generation flew faster, higher, with systems that could anticipate their every move. AI co-pilots, smart helmets, drones that never blinked. But none of it, none, could replicate a gut decision made in the fire of the unknown. The kind of judgment you can't program. The kind forged in fear and clarity. Far below her, the world turned. Airports buzzed, hangars filled, cadets trained, satellites spun. But up here, there was only memory. Not the kind written in books, but the kind that lived in the spaces between silence and sound. Her mind wandered back to the day they called her reckless, the day she disappeared into enemy skies alone, the day no one expected her to come back. But 68 people did, not because of her aircraft, but because she'd made a choice, one that cost her comfort and bought others time. The L-39 climbed a few hundred feet higher, its engines humming steadily. The F-35s followed, still behind, still quiet. Elise's voice came again, this time with just a hint of gravity. The sky remembers everything. And with that, she banked gently east, disappearing into the horizon. Not as a relic, not as a legend, but simply as a pilot who flew for something greater than herself. Maybe the story of Valkyrie isn't just about a fighter pilot. Maybe it's about all of us, about what it means to stay steady in the chaos, to hold your ground when the world doubts you, and to act with purpose even when no one is watching. In today's world, we're told that newer is always better. Faster computers, smarter tech, younger minds. But sometimes it's the steady hand, the weathered heart, and the quiet experience that saves the day. Elise Monroe flew an old jet, but it wasn't the machine that mattered. It was the judgment behind the controls. And isn't that true in real life too? Whether you're managing a family, running a small business, taking care of someone you love, or simply trying to make the right decision under pressure, it's not about having the newest tools. It's about knowing how to fly with what you have. So here's a question for you. What's your call sign moment? That quiet point in your life where you had to dig deep and rise above? Not because anyone was watching, but because it was right? We'd love to hear your story. Share it in the comments, whether it happened 40 years ago or just last week. And if this story moved you, if it made you think, reflect, or even remember someone who flew their own kind of mission, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. We share real, powerful stories that celebrate wisdom, courage, and the kind of strength you don't always see in headlines. To our older viewers, especially veterans, parents, mentors, thank you. You are the reason stories like Valkyrie matter. And to everyone listening, technology may change, but courage is timeless. Thank you for watching. Until next time, fly steady, live with purpose, and remember, the sky never forgets.